Mohammed Fararadid, militia leader of the Habrigada clan, orders an attack on a UN relief shipment, killing 24 Pakistani soldiers. In response to the continued Habrigada threat, Task Force Ranger is sent to Mogadishu with the sole purpose of capturing Adil. This force is comprised of U.S. Army Rangers and operators from the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, an elite fighting unit also known as Delta Force.
Hi, and welcome to GameSpot Live. I'm Greg Kasavin, filling in for Mr. Scott Osborne, who reviewed Delta Force Black Hawk Down for us on the site. Black Hawk Down, of course, is based on the UN's military intervention in Somalia during the early 90s, or more specifically about the book and the recent film that depicted those events. Actually, though, if you're expecting a realistic military shooter in a real-world setting, that's not exactly what you're going to get from this game. It's really much more of an arcade game, maybe more along the lines of something like Medal of Honor Allied Assault, rather than a realistic tactical shooter. Even though you sometimes have squad mates on your side in the game, you pretty much go in as a one-man army and play through the game pretty much like a typical first-person shooter rather than some sort of more realistic simulation like, say, Operation Flashpoint or Ghost Recon or something like that. Of course, a comparison to Medal of Honor Allied Assault is probably a bit generous for this game because the fact is Delta Force Black Hawk Down isn't executed very well, either as an action game or as a simulation. It's just not particularly good. The artificial intelligence of the enemies you'll be facing, as well as of the allies on your side, is just really poor for the most part. These guys can't hardly hit the broadside of a barn, and basically will be running all over the place and won't be acting in a manner as what you'd expect. And other than that, the difficulty of the single-player campaign is really uneven. Some missions are much too easy, while others are much too hard. And the whole campaign feels rather slapped together and disjointed. If you're familiar with the historical events that inform this game, then you'll know that the military forces in Somalia were faced with overwhelming odds, and the game does try to bring that across by making you fight against dozens of Somali troops kind of shooting at you from everywhere. These guys just kind of run up and get killed, and often there are civilians running around as well, and that's basically how this game tries to be true to its source material, but it doesn't actually make you feel like you're in a combat zone. You feel like you're playing an arcade game. Again, it's mostly due to the fact that the AI is so unrealistic and just so poorly done. None of the people running around in these battles seem like they're actual combatants so much as video game characters. Black Hawk Down does look really good, and in fact, some of the scenes do look very convincing from a visual standpoint. You really they come into these environments that seem like they're very run down, and there are a lot of people running around and so on and so forth. For a series that hasn't had graphics be one of its strongest suits, Black Hawk Down does manage to look pretty impressive. The sound isn't nearly as good. A lot of the voiceover in the game, again, is just much too comical. It can't be taken seriously at all, and a lot of the weapons seem rather underpowered and so forth. Black Hawk Down does have a number of multiplayer options. There's no cooperative mode, unfortunately, but there are kind of the usual set of deathmatch and capture the flag and team-based multiplayer features that you'd expect to see in a game like this. Even here, the game does run into some problems because some of these maps are so big and spread out that they just kind of devolve into tedious sniper matches rather than any kind of full-on and intense military skirmishes. And that's really an example of the sorts of problems that are pervasive throughout Black Hawk Down. It's a game that is disappointing for every moment that it's fun, and it's certainly not realistic in any way. And it just lacks any sort of real intensity to its gameplay, even when the graphics do manage to look dramatic. If you're a huge fan of the Delta Force series, you might appreciate that This game does take the series in a few good new directions, notably with its graphics. But other than that, on its own terms, as a shooter, either as a realistic one or just as an arcade-like one, Delta Force Black Hawk Down just doesn't cut it.